Park. What's the latest?
It's things are still really up in the air for summer camps. Um, just a second. Yeah, they're really not sure what's going to happen because we're doing these emergency childcare centers, which is using all of our staff and also using, you know, a lot of our budget. And then, you know, we don't know what's going to be happening in the city and the state and all that. And then, you know, we should have been almost through all of our hiring, and it just completely got stopped. So for seasonal staff. So, but our outdoor camp, our family camp, Camp Mather, was already canceled for the season, and that's our family camp up near Yosemite. But they're looking at different scenarios, either half the summer, if we have to keep doing the childcare centers for half the summer, then we do sort of regular-ish camps the rest of the summer, or
Right. So maybe a shortened camp season.
yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's still on hold for her YMCA camp, and they're, you know, thinking through everything from staggered meal times in the dining hall.
Right.
So there's, you know, social distancing. I talked with a camp today, and they said their challenge is that they can't bring the necessary folks that need to test the water, do all of these different required, you know, check-ins with the facility before they can open.
Right.
And that's their biggest glitch right now, as well as staffing, trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be our issue with the family camp, is getting all of our trades go up there to get the camp ready. They would be up there. They would have been up there at the beginning of this month, you know, working on camp. And they can't go up there. So yeah, it would just be impossible. But then our day camps, you know, that's all up in the air too.
Is there a set sort of last date there could be a call made?
I think that they're probably, you know, the general manager and the executive staff are, you know, that's the stuff that they're weighing or figuring out what that date would be, where they have to decide to at least do half of a season or what. And then, but it's also partly dependent on, you know, what the city says and what the mayor says and all that. So a lot of it's not even in our own department's hands. There's the child care task force that making the decisions.
You were so nice and sent the scenario ahead of time. That's going to make people think on their feet. You're so much nicer than I am.
Well, it was a longer scenario this time, and I thought that's a lot to ask people to try to remember when they break up into these small rooms.
That's true. You can't go back and see it, read it again, huh?
Unless you put it on a slide and they take a picture.
Yeah.
Right.
That before.
Right, and people can just pull out their phones. I may do that and just have access to it. Neely, I know you're excited. These are all your people.
I know. I'm totally excited.
That's how I'd be if I got to go to a group from Virginia Tech. I would be so excited to see my fellow Hokies.
They're a bit younger than I am, but
just a year or two.
Yeah. I graduated a couple years ago.
So I got a text. There is somebody who's still having trouble hasn't said he hasn't seen the email, so I thought maybe he could ask, is Elisa still planning to join?
Laura will join.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, she should be here any second.
Yay, I love all the videos. I can see people's faces.
Okay, we're getting there. What time is it? 6:30 now. We'll give it a couple more minutes.
And Greg's gonna pop on at least for part of the class tonight. Greg
Oh,
Johnson.
I think I see Greg. I think Greg is here.
Oh, hey, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good to meet you, Greg. So, Neely, I'm going to make you a co-host,
Okay.
and I'll make Kat a co-host again, just in case. And I saw Laura come in. There's Laura. Hi, Laura.
Oh, there you are.
Laura, we have one student who said he still has not gotten the email. I think that you may have resent it, and then after last week, and then I resent it from within the participants
Okay. Is the student,
section.
did they email you, Lucas?
It just came in the chat.
Okay. Just now?
So, yeah, he
Okay.
just said he still is having that issue. So,
Okay.
so
Whoever that is, if you could type it again, that would be great. I don't have anything short of before I came in.
okay, I asked him to send his email address to you
Great.
in the chat.
And then your
Okay,
email,
well,
oh, I was
think
just going to ask you, your email mentioned that there were a couple other folks who hadn't signed in yet, but
there were some, yeah, and this guy was one of them, and then a couple other people who, but I don't know if they just hadn't done it yet, but they're showing up as still pending on my screen. So, and I don't know if it's still the same list in what I sent in the screenshot, but there definitely were a few more people who were still, it still said pending. So I don't know if it's just they haven't done it yet or what. I have to go talk to Honey. Because I'm teaching a class now. I can't help you with this. No, because I don't know how much. This is not okay.
Free trial, Dad. Free trial, okay?
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Oh, here's one more person coming in. Another person coming in. All right, so we are ready for our second week of our KIT presentations. And I know that most of you were able to get in and figure out the modules that you were supposed to do. I'm sure there's still going to be some questions and that kind of stuff. So hopefully those will get answered, and then we'll have our presentation for the evening. So we met Neely last week. Kat is on with us here again, and Neely is here. Neely was here last week. And then we also have Greg Johnson, who's visiting because he's going to be presenting next week. So he wanted to get to know you all a little bit. And then Laura came on, I guess, for the beginning, just to answer any questions or help with any issues that people might be having. So Laura, do you want to start out with that?
Yeah, I just put a little note in chat here. If anybody's having any issues accessing the platform or any questions that they need answered, the easiest thing is probably just to type it. That way I can look up your account while we're online and see what we can do about that. And if I can't find a solution tonight, we'll connect with you offline tomorrow and get some answers. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about the Zoom because that's the San Francisco State platform. But if you're having trouble with the KIT online platform, please just type in the chat and let me know. I am probably going to pop off here in about 10 minutes, but Kat will watch the chat throughout the rest of the class, so she can pass along any information. And you can always email Kat, and she'll get us or Lucas, and they'll get us the information.
Mm-hmm. And Bo had sent an email to me earlier today asking about the quizzes, and if, say, just hypothetically, there was a quiz that you didn't get 100% and you wanted to go back in and see which was the correct answer. I reached out to our IT team, and they are researching it, but this might be something, since we've shifted to this new platform, that we're not quite ready to tackle. And I apologize for that, but you can email me any questions and I will go back in and look up those answers and get those to you if you want. So wanted to definitely answer that question. But we also just wanted to hear how you felt this first week of accessing the online content worked for you. You're our first university setting where we've curated content and created it as this package. So we just wanted to take a minute or two to find out from you, are you liking it? Is this working for you or not? Or how we could improve it. So I see Allison raising her hand.
So pretty much I thought that once you figure it out, it's easy to do, but figuring it out was tedious because at first glance, anytime you click on something or a sign, like your bar goes up, okay, you've completed it 100%. So I was confused. I was like, I don't think that's right. So I went back to the first week and I watched the videos, but then I was texting Bo. She's like, no, you have to do the quizzes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So it's like, it's just kind of unclear that you have to click each individual orange link and then take the quizzes.
And then there was one that didn't have
Inconvenient.
hold down. Right. It was a little weird.
Okay, Zoe, I see your hand raised.
So the content in the lessons is like really interesting, and the quizzes were like hard, like not too hard. Like it was like I didn't feel like I was like being tricked or asked any trick questions, but the actual setup of it, the courses itself, it took me, even with Tobin's screenshots and circling where to do it, took me a long time to figure it out. And it's like, it's not really organized chronologically. Like if you go on your dashboard, like I don't really know where to see it, so I had to you have to really dig to figure out what is done and what isn't. And
Okay.
because of the way on the bar it shows you your whole completion for the entire rest of the semester, it'll say that you're oh, you're 22% there, but I know I haven't done every single lesson. And then once you finally find the page, it's just this one long scroll. Here's the webinars, here's the video. So it's hard to tell is this, do I have to do all of this or what? But yeah.
Okay, this is so helpful. And since we're recording this, we can take this whole recorded section and pass this on to our IT team. So this is great. Any other comments? Yes. Hey, Alfredo. I love every time I see you, you've got a more unique backdrop. So that's one of the more unique ones. How are you doing tonight?
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm doing great. Actually, I'm very happy because I spent the whole weekend doing the whole program. So I was able to finish all the modules and taking all the quizzes and everything. And then I noticed that there was this question regarding, the percentages and where you at. So the easiest way to figure out what you have done is just go under history, download history, and then you have all the lessons, everything you're supposed to take, and what had been completed and what's the percentage. So I think that's the easiest way to try to figure out and navigate. The other thing is you have, which I think was really good, to see what the modules that you have completed and the ones that you need to have done. I agree that they are not in sequence though, but it maybe it's because the way it was arranged, but I don't see that as a big problem, but it helps. It helped me to navigate, looking at the history. And for me, the question that I have is I noticed that some of them didn't have a PowerPoint presentation, but there was this PowerPoint presentation that was used 7 times for the ones that didn't have anything. So for me, it was confusing because I was saving all the information. So I know that in the future, when I'm looking at one of the topics, and I said that PowerPoint is not gonna be good for me because I noticed that it was placed there just to fill out a space. So I will remove them and just leave the video there. So that way they don't get messed up. Other than that, it was great. And I noticed also, how can we get the certification though? Because I got 3.9 units. So when they ask us for the transcripts or things like that, who do we call or how do we let them know that this counts towards the UC system units?
Okay, Lucas, can you, so I know that they took all of this online content as part of the class in lieu of the field work. Can it be used a second time? I'm not sure how to answer that.
Everybody's earning hours for, they would earn it for the field work, and they'll probably earn the same number of hours to doing the content instead. And so I track that. But as far as if you want to have proof that you've taken the courses and even apply for continuing education credits, although you're in education, you may not be doing continuing education yet, but for me, I'm going to do that. So you can take those certificates that you get emailed to you and keep a record of those. That's I think the best way, because that says how many credits you're earning for each of the ones. And I found out, because I wasn't sure, that some of them are not certified for the continuing education credits anyway, that the ones without quizzes. That's why some of them didn't have quizzes. So those wouldn't apply, but the other ones do. And just keep track of those certificates in case you need them at some
I made a
Yeah.
folder in Outlook to keep track of all the certificates. So every time I
Yeah.
get emailed one, I just put in that folder.
And the other thing that I suggest everybody does, and I'm absolutely going to do, is keep track of the resources. Put them in a folder, because you never know when, you might be working just with a camper even before you're running your own program, but you might be working with a camper at camp, and your supervisor may not have something like that checklist tool to use, and you might be able to pull that out and say, hey, why don't we ask these kinds of questions of the family? Or when you're running your own program, those are really good resources to keep track of, even if they may not apply to your current situation right now.
The reason I was asking that is because I'm going to continue my studies, but if I want to take credit for the hours, which is almost a whole full full semester class for almost 4 units, who do they contact, KIT, or do they contact the San Francisco State? Because somehow you have to prove that those are good units. So that was the question. So in the future, when I transfer those units, they say, okay, we had to have the official transcript. I don't know how that's a work.
Laura, I think that the certificates count, right?
Or sorry, I was troubleshooting some accounts here in the chat.
Oh, okay. What I can do, Alfredo, is I will double check on that, and I will email Lucas, because that's a great question. My understanding is the certificates that you can download and save and print out and keep in, a folder or whatever, that's all you need, but I can double check that.
Yeah, because usually they say, where are your official transcripts? And then I'll say, okay.
To the, you would contact KIT.
Okay.
If you need verification of your CEUs in the future.
Okay.
Record of your user account, that wouldn't be a problem. But you should be able to just download the certificates and keep them as proof that you've done that content.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. So I think we're good. Keep typing questions into the chat box, and we're going to move on to our topic for tonight. But Lucas is going to send me the chat box, and we will follow up with all of that. But thank you so much. And once again, we appreciate your patience. We only had a couple weeks to put this together. And so we are all learning in different ways. So we are your learners just as much as you are ours this semester. So we are going to go ahead and we've got so much to talk about tonight. So we're going to transfer to our topic for tonight, which is respectful accommodations. And my snazzy co-host, Neely Matthews, is going to kick us off by giving you her recreation journey. And she is very excited to be here out of everyone at KIT, and she'll tell you why.
Hi, everybody. My name is Neely, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a background how I started my career way back when. I've been working with people with disabilities for over 30 years, and I started here in San Diego. I went to San Diego State, and as a freshman, I was undeclared and living at home, and I was a commuter, and I knew I wanted to work with children. I loved working with kids, did it pretty much growing up all the time. All my side jobs were working with kids. And when I got into college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. But come spring semester of my freshman year, there was a summer job fair. And I went to check it out because I didn't want to stay in San Diego. And there were all kinds of summer camp jobs, and I went to the table with the cutest boys, and that was Camp Ivica. And Camp Ivica was a summer camp for people with disabilities, all age groups, all disabilities, a segregated program. And I was like, okay, I'll try it out. And San Bernardino Mountains, it was run by an organization that was very popular back in the day, not a PC name, but they were called Crippled Children's Society. They are now called Ability First. They are out of Los Angeles. And I went to that program and I applied. I got a job as a counselor. 3 days before week of orientation, they called me up and asked me to be the arts and crafts specialist. I was like, all right, okay. You know, it was like, whatever, $10 more, who knows? And I'd never worked with a person with disability. So that first day when 50 campers got off the bus, about 35 of them who did not speak verbally, who used wheelchairs, who had complex disabilities. It was a huge eye-opening experience, and I absolutely fell in love with it. The two administrators were really well planned in how they ran the camp, and I was like, what do you guys do? You know, what are you studying in school? And they're like, rec therapy. I was like, I love it. I got to do this. So I went back to San Diego State. I declared my major. I ended up working at Camp Hyvika for 5 summers in a row and absolutely loved it. Worked my way up to the assistant camp director. And while I was at San Diego State doing some field work, I heard about San Francisco State and how their program was top notch. And I decided, well, that's where I need to be. I've always been an experiential learner. I love learning by doing. And I took myself and went to San Francisco and fell in love with the program, and I'm a graduate of SFSU. So that is where I started my journey. My journey continued with, let's see, I did field work in psych. I did my internship in physical rehabilitation. I worked in residential camping. I worked in day camps. I worked in a teen residential facility, and I just took everything I could. While I was at San Francisco State, I would walk over to the park. I don't know if you can still do that or not, but I used to walk through the golf course to work at the rec center for the handicapped, I think they called it at the time. And I was an aquatic specialist. I taught swimming. I was a lifeguard. And I loved working with people with disabilities. After I graduated from San Diego,
Neely, sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if everybody knows that Rec Center for the Handicapped is what the Pomeroy Center used to be called.
Okay, there we go.
Back in the day. So yeah,
back in the day.
half of the class was going to do their field work at the Pomeroy Center.
Oh yeah.
And that's where they were getting started. And then, you know, of course it closed. So unfortunately, but most people here are familiar with it. They've all been there, I think, at least on a field trip or something. But it's been there quite a while. It's been there a while.
It was a great experience. I started volunteering and then I got a job there, and I worked there for several years while still going to school. Part of my experience has been that I have absolutely loved to find new and creative things that I can do to better myself, to learn and help people in unique ways. And by that, I mean, when I was doing physical rehab and I was working in adaptive aquatics, I also went to a shiatsu massage school down in the Mission. I don't know if that's still there or not either, but I did that and I learned shiatsu massage. And then I heard about Watsu, which is shiatsu massage in the water. And I learned that, and I started doing that at the center you just spoke about. And I started doing that as co-treatments with physical therapists at Alta Bates Herrick in Berkeley. So I started just kind of learning everything I could, random stuff from all over, and put it together. So eventually I was working 3 jobs in San Francisco, and I was not making a whole lot of money. I'm sure some of you out there can relate to that. So I moved back to San Diego and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I was kind of working 3 jobs. They were paying the rent, but I just wasn't really finding what I wanted to do in my career. I moved to San Diego. I kind of applied all over the country. And then I heard about this program called Inclusion at the JCC in La Jolla. And I went out and I met this woman, Dr. Mary Shea. She's one of the founders of KIT and a pretty incredible person. And I met her and started working for her at the JCC for this thing called Inclusion. And I'd always worked in segregated programs with people with disabilities. And when I heard about Inclusion, it just made so much sense to me. It was like, yeah, of course, they should be with whoever they want to be and do whatever they want to do. And everyone should accommodate that. So that was my start into Inclusion. I worked there for 3.5 years. KIT was born out of this program at the JCC. I don't know if you've heard about the history about KIT, but what happened was people were bringing their kids to a summer day camp of 800 plus kids a day. They were bringing their kids from all over San Diego County, driving 30, 40, 50 miles just so their kids could be included in a regular program. And they kept saying, oh, you guys should start this program other places. So instead of doing that, a group of people got together and said, well, instead of just starting these programs, what we should do is we should teach people how to include people and children and teenagers with disabilities into their already existing programs. And that's really how KIT was born. So when KIT was born, they had 2 to 3 employees, and I was not an employee. I became the first contract trainer. So whenever they needed a training, they would send me out and say, go tell people Inclusion is great. And I'd be like, I think Inclusion is great. You should do this. And that's kind of how it all started. I've been working as an employee with KIT since 2006, when we got a grant here in San Diego to work with 6 Navy Child Development Centers. I came on and I taught the Navy Child Development Center trainers how to train their staff, and I did child-specific consultation. And that has grown into our work with all the branches of the military. And currently, I've had a few positions at KIT, but currently I am the Navy inclusion specialist. So that is a little bit about what I do. I am also, after all that, I am a CTRS. I'm very proud of being a CTRS. I think it validates the profession, and I think it's an awesome thing to be a part of. I recently got my, oh, I should brought it out here. I recently got my 25 years as a CTRS pin, which is like this big, but it's still pretty cool. So no gold watch, just a little pin. That's all.
Thanks, Neely. Before we move on to tonight's topic, I bet there might be a few questions out there, either in terms of being a CTRS that you have for Neely, or just something to do with her journey. So you can either type it into the chat box, or if you just want to unmute, this is a great time to pick her brain on anything. Maybe it's adapted aquatics.
Did you say you went to the table with all the cute boys and that's why you went there?
Yeah, I was being transparent. It was true. You know what? Hey, I was like 19 years old.
I know David Pringle has a question. I can see he's looking there. He's so excited to ask a question. Now he's shaking his head no. I won't put you on the spot.
No, I didn't have a question, but it's pretty cool that we all went to the Pomeroy Center, so that's kind of cool.
I just put you on the spot. You get extra credit for that. I don't know how that works, but Lucas will give you something. I
had some pretty amazing experience there, I will tell you, especially in the aquatics department. I worked in other departments as well, but aquatics was like amazing.
Did you use Watsu since then, or did you only use that back in the day?
I have used it since then, mostly just on not as like a practitioner for like income, but I have used it on people that I know. I'm also second level Reiki certified, so I use that on people that I know as well, just as kind of healing. But Watsu was, it's really, really interesting. I learned it up in Harbin Hot Springs by Harold Dull, the man who created it, which is a whole nother story.
As all stories about Harbin Hot Springs are.
Yes, because this conservative, I don't even know where to go. I had no idea what I was getting into. Absolutely not.
Neely, I know you've shared your perspective on internship experiences because you had quite a range.
Yes, thank you, Kat. And when I said conservative, by the way, I just meant like in what I wear, because in Harbin Hot Springs, they don't wear anything. So my internship for SFSU was really interesting. I didn't have the greatest supervisor. Both my internship supervisor through school and the one at the hospital. So what happened was I was kind of put there. I really did want to do physical rehab because early on in my career, I was like, oh my gosh, I'll do anything but work with kids and behavior. Of course, that's what I specialize in now. But I just thought physical rehab for sure. So my supervisor at the hospital, my first day there, she's like, oh, I'll be right back. She sat me at her desk. She said, I'll be right back. And she went and got a cup of tea and she didn't come back for 3 hours. And I sat there and I waited for her. And I quickly realized through this internship that it was going to be only what I made it to be. And so I just started to work with everyone that would talk to me. I worked with speech therapists, I worked with occupational therapists, I worked with physical therapists. I co-treated, I started going in a patient's room and be like, what do you like to do? Oh, you are a painter, let's paint. Or you want a haircut? Let's go get a haircut. And I'd make other therapists go and co-train with me so they could bill for it. And it ended up being a really great experience, but I learned that you need to be open and you need to be the one that makes your experience what it is. Do not rely on other people to make your experience worthy, validated, important. You got that. You can do that yourself.
Thanks, Neely. When we were prepping for tonight's class, I just was really impressed with that perspective. I wanted to make sure she had a chance to share that. So as you can tell, Neely has great stories. So for this evening's topic, we are pretty light on the slides and pretty heavy on the stories and real world examples. So Neely shared last week as her little PSA to tease you into coming to tonight's class that she really wants to give real world examples and especially accommodations on the fly, because that's definitely something I experienced when I did my youth programs, is that I would say 80% of the time, I did not know before the first day that family walked through the door or that youth came to my program that they needed any accommodations. And we really had to sort of figure it out in the moment. So that's definitely one of Neely's strengths and what we're going to focus on tonight. So I'm going to share my screen.
And Kat, it's such a great follow-up to one of the topics that came up last week about, you know, the importance of knowing everything you can ahead of time, but that so often you don't. You don't know things ahead of time, and people show up, and for whatever reason that they didn't tell you, or they didn't know how to let you know, or they were afraid to let you know, or whatever it is. So we you know, even if we have a really good system for getting that information, we're still going to have surprises and need to accommodate on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide deck? I'm going to try to move my chat box. Does
They
my
can.
chat box?
I'm getting it. I can see it. Okay.
Okay. Is my chat box in the way of the,
Um,
because sometimes it makes a black sort of box.
I don't know. It's on my computer.
There's no chat box visible. It's just the presentation.
All right, perfect. Thank you, whoever shared that. You were really, really articulate. So Neely has introduced herself. She's a CTRS, and I put my snazzy letters after my name, my Master's of Science in Recreation Administration. Yahoo. So today's topic, the second one out of 5, respectful accommodations. And take it away, Neely. And
Okay.
I do want to mention, I will be sort of monitoring the chat box and may break in and interrupt Neely if there's a question that you pose or a comment.
Or she may break in and give an addition or another story.
Yes.
Okay. So respectful accommodation is what we're talking about. And this is the definition: an individualized support that promotes access to learning, recreation, leisure, or work. It is known as a reasonable modification in the Americans with Disabilities Act. Respectful accommodation, we hope to be more the spirit of the law than the letter of the law. Next.
Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that when we think about our roles moving forward, is we're not just thinking in terms of our program participants and our patrons, but we're also going to be supervisors and employers. So respectful accommodations are also going to apply to what your staff need from you as well.
So we want to take a little poll here in the chat box about how much you think the average accommodation will cost or does cost. Also, as a point of information, Kat is reading the chat box for me because it is difficult for me to see as I need that accommodation. I have a pretty significant visual impairment, so she is going to help me out with that.
Okay, $100, 150, 250, 150 to 200, 200 to 1,000, 500, 200, 800, 500, 700. Going once, going twice.
Okay.
100 plus. Money depends on the program. However, if there are enough clients, it becomes more expensive. So up to 5,000. 300,
okay.
375. David Pringle says 0.
David. Okay. Why 0? I want to hear the
What's
answer.
the average accommodation? So I was just thinking, like, a lot of times there may not be a cost to just change things around, you know.
Ding, ding, ding. Gold star. Okay. Yeah, the average accommodation, both in my years of experience in various settings, is usually less than $50. That is not depending on what you're doing, where you are, and who you're accommodating for. And we're going to talk about some of those specific accommodations that might cost more, depending, and then some that shouldn't cost much at all. Okay, so we're going to talk about some considerations. So when you're looking at accommodation, last week you spoke to maybe some of the questions you might ask, or some of the forms, or how you're going to market that you have an inclusive settings. if you do find out that someone does need an accommodation, let's say you have a fantastic registration form and someone gives advance notice or request that they need an accommodation. That request will be dependent on what it is that they need. So you don't want to make assumptions of what they will need. If somebody puts down, do you need any accommodations? And let's say they say, my child has cerebral palsy, or my partner has cerebral palsy and will be attending this yoga class. So, you know, we might need accommodation. You're not going to run in there with a whole bunch of equipment because you don't know what it is that they need accommodated or what type of supports that they need. So you want to find out that information prior to assuming that they're going to need something. It's like people who are good-natured and try to run and help somebody across the street. That person who's moving slowly across the street may or may not want help. They may need assistance. They might not want assistance. They may just be walking slowly. So you would never want to assume somebody needs something, just like you wouldn't walk up behind a wheelchair and start pushing someone because you think that that's going to help them. You would ask and not make an assumption first. So a lot of accommodations happen depending on the population you're working in, the setting you're working in. They're going to happen on the fly. You might not realize, and that person might not realize they need an accommodation. Let's say somebody is, doing an adult outdoor activity. They are rock climbing. And when they're going rock climbing, this person did not realize that the strength in their hands was going to be an issue. So they might need some sort of assistance, or you might need to modify the actual climb so that they can help, or the person down below who's belaying them might need to be a bit stronger to give them more tension so they can get up on the rock. So it really depends that some of those things might be on the fly. You want to provide an accommodation only when it's necessary, not because you think someone needs to be accommodated. Phase out when appropriate, or what we call the aid and fade. So a lot of times a natural support may take over. So in our experience at KIT, we work with a lot of providers who work with children. And whether you work with children or not, you find that when you demonstrate or someone demonstrates that assistance might be needed, a lot of times the people who are in that same program or in the same arena with that group of people, when they see that someone needs assistance, they might just jump in and give them that help. They might just jump in and give them that support. So I was talking to you earlier about the JCC in La Jolla, and we had all different kinds of camps, and any child with a disability who wanted to be in a specialized camp had the opportunity to do so. So that means that we had a little girl, and we'll call her Sarah, and Sarah was 10 years old, and she came and wanted to be in the theater arts camp. So the theater arts camp did a play every session, and I think it took them maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and then they performed this musical or whatever it was. And Sarah had spinal muscular atrophy, and she was able to communicate. She used a power wheelchair, but she could not do anything for herself. She spoke beautifully and she had a beautiful singing voice, but she did need to have someone with her all the time, for the reason that if her head fell down like this with your chin toward your chest, she would stop breathing because she did not have the muscles in her neck to lift her head up. So that's kind of serious. So you need to make sure someone's around so she doesn't stop breathing. And we had an aide with her. Well, the story goes that Sarah was singing and the aide comes to me and they're very worried because what are we going to do if during the performance, if Sarah's singing and all of a sudden her head falls down? And this was pretty much the aide's job. The aide's job was to take their hand, lift her head up by the forehead, lift her head by the forehead, and put her head back. And we thought, oh, that's really not going to look very inclusive with this aide running out onto the stage, throwing her head back so that she could breathe again. So we said, you know what, she's doing really well. We'll just kind of try to go in the background and be quiet. And if it happens, you know, we have to lift her head, that's all. So the whole show went on. It was for all the parents and all the friends came and it was great. And we're standing in the wings, you know, ready to run out there, try and be inconspicuous as possible. And of course, there's the finale. All the kids are lined up. Sarah's dead center. She's got two of her buddies on the side of her. She starts to sing, her head falls, and just as we go out there, both kids on both sides of her take their hand and lift her head up. That was a natural support. They knew what she needed and they did it for her. And we just stood on the side waiting and they all finished. And it was amazing because they had seen someone do it for so long. It wasn't hard, it wasn't difficult, but they knew that's what she needed. And that's when the natural supports take over.
Neely, can I share a couple quick stories?
Sure.
So I wanted to explain the middle picture on the slide. And sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy. I took this at a summer camp. And the young man who's sitting down, who's having this massage roller on his back, had for several days in a row, when this large group assembly happened and kids started singing loudly, he would run out of the building. And so his counselor behind him, 16-year-old counselor, said, I know that when he gets upset, deep pressure calms him down. Let me ask him if this is something that would make him feel better. And she said, I saw $14 at Target in the yoga aisle, these rollers, and I know that deep pressure is comforting for him. So we talked with the family. They said, yeah, let's give it a try. We bought it. And when the kids started coming together for assembly, she started rolling his back. And we found that if every once in a while during this loud time that tends to be overwhelming for him, if she rolled his back, that was just enough of an aid, enough of a support that he was willing to stay in that setting and tolerate it. So $14, and it was only used, that was the only time during the entire day, was at that 1 20-minute assembly time. And then the other natural supports that I'd love to talk about is when I've seen adult staff model a really simple support at one or another time, like just taking the wrapper off of a Capri Sun straw and pushing it in. But then after the other people in the group have seen that and they start to form friendships, before providing that accommodation, giving it a beat, waiting, and seeing if peers and friends might do it just as a natural result of friendships being formed, because kids naturally want to help each other out. So just wanted to share those two quick stories.
Thank you, Kat. One of the most important things you can do is see if something works. So sometimes you are going to come up with an accommodation and it's not going to work. But the best thing about accommodations is if it doesn't work, you can go back and try something else, or you can try the same thing again. And it just depends on what the need is and the range of success that both the individual and the person trying. So you, just like Kat gave you that example of that roller and that deep pressure, maybe certain pressure was going to be okay and other pressure wasn't going to be okay. So you might have to try something different. Or maybe it was going to need to ramp up in a little bit because the music was going to get louder or the assembly would be different.
And Lucas just mentioned that so much of it is about thinking creatively. And Neely is well known throughout KIT as being one of the most creative people in terms of thinking outside of the box with accommodations.
Okay. Yeah. Next slide.
I'm trying, it's not.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay, so communication. So one of a type of an accommodation would be communication. There's lots of types of accommodations. We didn't list everything here because we don't have the time, and there is a long list. We even, actually I have a list probably somewhere if you're interested. My email will be at the end of the presentation, and I can send you some of the accommodations we've come up with just both household items and for specific disabilities in general. We kind of have accumulated those over the years. So communication, you want to know the extent. So communication is communicating with someone. I want to know the extent of that communication. I want to know, is it English as a second language? Is the communication a delay? For example, with someone with autism or on the autism spectrum, maybe the delay is, a lot of times people with autism have a processing. So you will ask a question, they will hear the question, they need to process the information, and then they're going to give you an answer. Well, that answer might come as an 8-second delay. So 8 seconds, if you're to sit there right now and I'm going to ask you a question, what color is your hair? And you would have to count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, till 8 to give the answer. That's going to seem like quite a bit of time because you're used to immediate response. So you need to know not only like what the person's ability is, but how to support them within that communication and how they prefer to be communicated to. So there are certain people just even that you know, or within KIT organization, I know that there are certain people that I'm going to actually call and talk to on the phone. It's going to be easier that way. Other people I know, it's going to be easier because of, especially now, it's going to be easier to text them because they're in, 400 square foot apartment and they're living with their partner who's also working from home. So right now it's kind of crazy. I better just text instead of call or email. So there might be a specific preference. ASL versus somebody who's hearing impaired is very significantly different. Someone who uses ASL as opposed to somebody who's hearing impaired and might need a hearing aid, they're going to communicate very differently. Before I left to transfer to San Francisco, I did field work at San Diego Psychiatric Hospital. I was in my first semester of learning ASL, and I came to work one day and my supervisor said, Neely, you need to go over there. We have a new patient and he knows ASL. And I was like, no, I'm not good at it. I'm just learning. I'm not fluent. I'm really not comfortable doing that. She's like, well, you have to go. You need to go over there. And I protested. I was like, I really don't want to do that because my ASL is very, very basic. She's like, oh, well, no one's been talking to him. You need to go over there and you need to use your ASL. Okay. So I walk over there, and in my just horrible ASL, I was like, hi, my name is Neely. Nice to meet you. And he goes, excuse me, can you speak up? I can't hear you. And I was mortified. I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, he's like, I said, I'm really sorry. I was told that you use ASL. He's like, no, I just can't hear you. It was top 10 embarrassing moments. So they really needed to know the extent of his hearing impairment, and maybe he was learning ASL, but he definitely didn't know ASL. Assistive technology, there's a lot out there. I mean, when I was going to school, the assistive technology was like buttons, a major button that they used to like make toys go or make robots go. It's like all about the button. But now there's all these apps, you know, an app that will help someone communicate or text, or app that helps, like for children, you can push a picture and it says what it is. There's just tons and tons and tons of stuff out there. There's assistive technology for people who are amputees, or people who, all kinds of things. So it's boundless. If you are in a place where you are in charge of doing signage or directions or any of that, I would definitely encourage you. You will bypass a lot of accommodations if you use both written language and pictures, even arrows. But sometimes there are more than one language. So you want to make sure that you're being simple, that you're being concrete to the point, and you might want to, you know, put down there a very a funny little phrase that we use a lot of the times when we're teaching childcare providers, and that is if-then statements. If-then statements are concrete because, you know, if this happens, if you do this, then this will happen. Or when you do this, then this will happen. So if you run with scissors, then you are going to get hurt. But pictures and symbols go a long way when you're talking about communication and directions, and just being clear so that people kind of understand what you're trying to get across.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't focus this week because we talked about it last week, but accessibility of websites is big in terms of communication, and having accommodations in terms of different formats of literature, and getting the different messages out.
Okay, this is my favorite part. Equipment. Equipment is amazing, but you don't always need to use it unless you need to use it. So again, it's a case by case. When are you required to provide an accommodation? When do you think you should be required to provide an accommodation?
So is this a question you're asking us?
Yeah.
Okay. So someone put when there is a need?
Yes. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have worked with parents, but both Kat and I have worked at YMCAs before. And parents often think, and I am a parent, so I get to say this, that they should be accommodated differently for their children. So I'm pulling up to summer camp, and your policy is that I get out of the car, come get my kid and sign them out. But I don't feel like doing that. So I am going to call you on the phone, and I'm going to ask you, can you just bring my kid out? I'm going to do like the slow drive-by. They can just jump in. I think I need to be accommodated. I'm pretty sure I should be accommodated.
Okay.
You accommodate me?
Someone else put significant financial need, and then when it's something they have used in the past and requested.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an interesting comment that they, okay, so I'm going to hold on to that one. Significant need is also relative. They might think it's significant to them, but it needs to be something that you need to provide the same access that everyone else would get. So you're not providing an accommodation based on something that would make an exception. You're providing an accommodation so that that child or that person can be successful within that program or activity. The person, if it's something that someone said that something they've had before, so that might be an interpreter, that might be, if it is a piece of equipment, they may already have it. So for example, you see the picture of the person in the swimming pool with the flotation device around their neck. That might be their personal flotation device. Certain kids may have, and this is where an accommodation might come in, which is actually also an exception to the rule. So I worked in adaptive aquatics for 15 years. In a lot of pools, what do you call them? The floaty, the ring? What do you call that? Like inner
The
tube.
life jacket? Oh,
No,
inner
no,
tube.
inner tube. An
A
inner
pool
tube was
noodle.
not, an inner tube was not allowed. Okay? So an inner tube was not allowed. It had to be like a Coast Guard approved flotation device. Well, because of a person's disability, not all of them could be supported with a personal flotation device that is accredited by the Coast Guard. They needed an inner tube. So because the exception was made for that, because that was an accommodation for them, but they couldn't be left alone in the inner tube in the pool. So that was accommodation for the rules of that pool, of the aquatic center.
And Neely, I think you bring up a really good point that it depends on the activity and the setting, because we hear so often, my child has a one-on-one aid during the school day, therefore we must have a one-on-one aid.
That's right.
In our after-school program or our soccer team. And you can still on a case-by-case basis say what's needed to be successful in this sports activity or this after-school program. It may be that for these activities, a one-on-one aid is not needed. And we've even seen the opposite, where there are kids that may need one-on-one support in an out-of-school time setting because there's less structure, perhaps the environments are much bigger, there's different safety aspects, and they may require one-on-one support in the out-of-school time program, but don't need that in a school day. It really just depends.
It's so case by case. You can't go by the person's disability. You can't go by, you have to assess, you have to ask a lot of questions. You don't have to ask a lot of personal questions. You just have to ask the right questions. You need to know how they need to be supported and what kind of supports they're looking for. And you might come up with other supports that are not necessarily what they're asking for. Like Kat mentioned, this kid has a one-on-one in school, so they need a one-on-one in summer camp. Well, you might just need to change the ratio so that it's not 1-12, it's more 2-8. So the kid doesn't need necessarily a one-on-one, but they might need a smaller group, or they might need an extra staff for that group. And when it comes to equipment, you see that gentleman in the bottom corner, or the bottom picture, golfing. I guarantee you he came with that chair. There's no way anyone's going to provide that chair. That's a two-stand wheelchair. So that comes down and then it automatically props him to stand. And that is extremely expensive. So a lot of times when people are like, oh, we're going to have to provide a lift, we're going to have to provide this adaptive seat. Well, a lot of times they already have it. They're already going to come with that because they needed it somewhere else. And I'm going to talk about some resources later, but also in the summer camp, we have provided equipment for certain kids during certain weeks of summer camp that we have borrowed from other places. We had a child who was blind who was in our sports camp, which was very nervous for me. But what ended up happening was I borrowed a soccer ball that had bells in it from the Braille Institute. I borrowed a football that had a whistle in it from the Braille Institute. So the whole time he was at camp, the other kids were playing with these like they were exactly what they were supposed to be for that. You know, they weren't like a different size football. It was like a legal size, you know, football and all that good stuff. And it just had those adaptations to it. So all the kids could use it with this kid, and it worked out really well.
Neely, you will be happy to know that this para golfer, SF Rec and Park, recently bought 2 for their 5 golf courses.
What? Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That was all because of Lucas, I'm sure.
Wow.
Guess how much they cost, Neely? Don't look down in the chat box. Guess.
I can't read it. How much did they cost? I would think they cost 25 grand.
Very close, 30K each.
Ooh, nice.
So I bet, and
Years
Lucas,
of shopping.
you can chime in, but I mean, I bet you budgeted for that. I mean, that was something that you planned ahead for, right?
That's really impressive. How often do they get used?
It's very complicated. It was a lot more complicated than just buying them. And actually, one of the students here works at one of the golf courses. So he's seen them firsthand and probably seen them used there. So he might have something to chime in about, Dylan. But I convinced the head of our finance department and the head of our property management, and we, had to work with our city attorney and the mayor's office on disability, but we had to provide something, and we had one old worn out golf cart that was not very useful for most people and wasn't working anymore. So we had to replace it, and we had to provide something, and this was what was being requested by members of the public. And so it was very expensive, but they have been getting used. The complication is that some of the golf courses are really steep in San Francisco, and making sure they're, being used safely and all that. So
and it looks like you probably have to have some trunk support for that.
I mean, they're amazing. I don't think you really need that much of your own support, except for being able to, and some people use them with one arm as opposed to 2 arms. But they really support you a lot, and come with different kinds of belts and that kind of stuff. I tried it out. It's hard to get used to driving it, but they're very incredible machines.
Really cool. Yeah.
Dylan, do you have anything you want to add?
Very excited to learn about that. Thank you.
Yeah, Dylan, you want to share anything?
I think Lucas covered most of it. Like you said, it's pretty great. It's well balanced. As opposed to the old ones we used to have. It's fantastic. And I think, like, talking with accommodation, like, the city's done a great job with helping people out. Only thing is, we just ask that you in advance let us know that you need to use it. That's the one thing. Because
are they used pretty often?
We've used it about 2 or 3 times. It's been with the same person, but we have met people who have their own. But yeah, usually it's the same people who use them.
So you guys probably have these as well, but the city of San Diego has 2 of the kind of off-roading wheelchairs that can go on the beach, and people can come and check those out from the beach. Like they kind of are in a specific area, and they are owned by the San Diego Park and Rec.
We don't actually have any of those, but we don't really have beach
That's
property
actually
that's
true.
really ours. But we've worked with the GGNRA, the National Recreation, and they have them, and we've worked with them so they could store them somewhere for somebody to pick up to use at Ocean Beach.
Mm-hmm. So I remember last week someone kind of mentioning, you know, they couldn't get like their administration where they worked to pay for something. And if you use something and it works, sometimes you're able to show, hey, I made this and it's working. For example, let's say that roller was too expensive and they wouldn't pay for it. So I made it out of PVC pipe and tennis balls, and I made one. And then it starts breaking down at the end of center. I was like, oh, this is so good. It worked out. You know, maybe you guys can invest in an upgrade. That's a small example, but it could be other things. So don't get defeated if something is not going to work or someone's not going to pay for it. Let's see. Are we still talking about equipment? Yep.
We can if you want. Do you want me to move it back?
I was just going to tell this story. So my first summer working at that, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the table here. My first summer working at that residential summer camp, part of being a program specialist was one of our duties was that we fed campers who couldn't feed themselves. And that was so that when everyone came to the family style dining, the camper who couldn't feed themselves could participate. So they didn't have to stay later or come earlier or anything like that. So one of the sessions, I had a 12-year-old girl, and her name was Jennifer. And Jennifer had cerebral palsy. She also used a power wheelchair, and cognitively, everything was fine. She was amazing, beautiful, bright little girl. And I would feed her, and she had no issues. She just, she was very easy to feed. And I noticed that one day her hands, I don't know if everyone could see me, but her hands were turned in like this. Okay. So one day I noticed that she picked up her arm. She could pick up her arm this way, and she kind of, her forehead. So I was like, Jennifer, have you ever fed yourself? And she was like, oh no, she didn't do anything for herself. Every daily living skill, everything, get up, get dressed, go to the bathroom, everything she needed assistance with. She had never done anything for herself. So I was like, okay, I totally think that she could feed herself. We should try this. So she couldn't pick her arm up, trying to figure out the best words to use this for. She didn't have a lot of arm strength. So I thought we should use the leverage of the table. So I took a fork and I attached it to a knife, and I put it in her hand, and to use on the table. Well, it was too heavy. She couldn't hold on to it. It didn't work. So the next day I duct taped a plastic fork to a plastic knife, and we cut up the food. So the food was already cut. She was able to, with the fork pointing out, use the leverage. I'll just use my arm, leverage of the table. She stabbed the food, brought the fork back up, and ate from the fork. So for the first time in her life, she fed herself. Well, as mentioned, that was right after my freshman year. So I was like pretty excited that I designed a fork. I thought I was kind of hot stuff. So her parents came to visit. So I ran out to her parents. I was like, oh my gosh, I made this fork. Your daughter can feed herself. And her parents were like, that's nice. They were not nearly as excited as I was, which was a little bit surprising to me. But what I didn't realize is that when you're a parent of a child with a disability, like you do something for that child for 12 years, you might not be ready for something different. Like, because you're ready for something doesn't mean other people are going to need more time. Well, they did need a little bit more time. And the next year when Jennifer came back to camp, she had a big old fancy fork made by the occupational therapist that sure they got credit for, but that I designed, but that's okay, because we all know the real story, and had like all this like mesh, and she could grab onto it, and it was like just this part was metal, so it wasn't going to break. That's my fork story. It's kind of fun, exciting. Okay, next.
I love that story. And how much was that accommodation, Neely? Like 3 cents?
That was free because I stole everything.
No, there you go. Even better. All right, you ready for the next slide?
Yeah. All right, so I really started thinking about this, and I think that you, as new park and recreation personnel and outdoor people, are going to be, you're going to start to see things that a lot of people haven't seen before because of this current situation. It is affecting more people in different ways than we really have a handle on, or that we're going to know for quite a while. So although there are these interpersonal skills that have been around forever, and especially mental wellness, when we don't know how someone is affected or will be affected by certain situations, it's really important to know that your accommodations may have to be done on the fly, because a lot of times someone might not know they're going to need an accommodation. It could be that they might need social emotional support that they were not expecting. It could be that you're not expecting to have a crowd, and then too many people come and you have a crowd, and somebody has anxiety because they're, you know, in a high risk group, and they're afraid that someone's going to cough or sneeze, or they could have another traumatic situation from their past that comes up. It's important to know that not all people are great with social cues. Not all people have that as part of their repertoire. Not all people are good with spatial awareness. I never enjoyed being on the metro or the subway or the Muni during high peak hours, because I don't like people pushing up against me and being super close and feeling like a sardine. It makes me very anxious. So some people have the opposite, where they're not aware of their spatial awareness and they need a physical or a visual cue to keep a certain distance. Like if you go to the supermarket here in San Diego, I don't know what it's like in San Francisco right now, but they're giving you visual cues on how far away you can line up or how many people can be in a certain area at a certain time. So there are going to be a lot of interpersonal, mental health, mental wellness, social emotional supports that are going to be needed. It's going to be accommodations that you're probably going to be making more on the fly than you're aware of. Sometimes you might have the notice or the forethought, but they might also just come up, and you're just going to have to be open and really patient and be like, okay, what is it that I can do? How can I support you? What do we need to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many settings that haven't required social distance in the past, and thinking through not only how to create those environments, but how are you going to respectfully provide guidance and support when people need those prompts in ways that don't embarrass them or make them uncomfortable. Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see that. Do you like my picture, Neely, on that slide?
Hilarious.
I saw Jane Lynch at the Salt Lake City airport when I was there. She was very nice.
I love her in that show.
Side note there.
They did inclusion very well in that show.
Yeah.
So this is something I recently saw on social media. This is a college student who is working with people who are deaf or the deaf community. And they were a lot of people that are in the deaf community, you read lips. And she was noticing that they were obviously having a very hard time with everybody wearing face masks. They could not communicate or see what someone was saying because they had a face mask on. So she designed this face mask so that someone could read her lips, which I really thought was brilliant. And it's really also great for people to see emotion, for people to see somebody smiling. I have a neighbor who's a police captain, and he's a good friend of ours. And he did something with his officers where they're also, right now, when the police officers go out, they have a mask and they have goggles, and then they have their hat, and they really kind of look stormtrooper-esque. They're not looking very comforting to the public. So what he did was he took everyone's picture in the department and he blew it up really large and laminated it so that they could wear it on the outside of their uniform, and just to show what their face looked like. I also read that a lot of nurses are doing the same thing because they're so covered up, and because it's necessary and it's needed, but they needed to bring that personal touch back to the patients, back to the community, back to the people that they're working with, that, oh, this is what I look like. This is really who I am. And that nice picture seems to be helping with interactions with the public, because of course they're in the profession where they want to keep people calm. They don't want people to become agitated or escalated. So I thought that this was a great example from this college student of coming up with something that was going to not only help, but I think this would help more than just people who read lips. I think this would be great for small children too, to see your smile, to see, your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thinking about universal design, if that's something that every mask had, and that's just the norm. Yep. So in the chat box, what are your ideas? What possible accommodations do you think may need to be implemented or offered moving forward in recreation, parks, tourism settings that you may be working in? Alfredo, wake up. So go ahead and just type them into the chat box. Oh, okay. So smaller group sizes, especially at the beginning when you're resetting expectations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
More one-on-one. There may be children that in the past their behavior was just concerning, but because it has to do with putting hands on other kids, or I had a kid who liked to lick other kids. It shifts from being concerning to unsafe when you're in this COVID-19 situation. I also worked with a child who loved to fluff the fat folds of other people. He'd like to go up and find where your fat was and wiggle it. That was a fun thing to try to work that out. If outside, offer breaks in shaded areas to prevent dehydration and heat exhaustion. Yeah, If they are wearing masks, you overheat much easier. Okay, so personal protection gear becoming more everyday. So having it available for staff, participants, patrons. More outdoor recreation, so you can get that space. You have distance between each other. All right. Lucas had his ID bad licked once. Yeah. Comes with the territory. Offer more classes. Colleen, can you expand on that? I don't know if you'd be willing to unmute. What would be the benefit of offering more classes?
You could have more groups and they could be like smaller sizes.
Yeah, so you offer more times, but instead of 30 participants, it's 15 in the same amount of space. Reservations to popular places so that there are fewer people there at a time. Right, so there'd just be blocks of time as opposed to just come anytime, but make sure that people can go there every day. Not the same people can go there every day. Small groups in places for less time so more people can go in a day. So there wouldn't be the lines. Neely, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that it's there. Most of them are about space and group size.
Mm-hmm. And maybe time to clean in between groups. Mm-hmm. So you may need more time between classes. Staggered check-in, lunch, etc. times. Yep, basically any setting where there's large groups, how can you whittle it down to have that space? Have hand sanitizers everywhere or in new rooms and spaces.
I think this is going to be a lot of the, I think this is going to be a lot procedure wise.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I'm interested in creating more of will be sequence cards or visual supports to help teach children different procedures that they've never had before. So if kids aren't used to washing their hands in between each activity, and that's new for them, they may need that visual support for the first time. Or if there's just different rules, I'm not assuming that just typewritten words is enough, but actually having symbols to show those steps.
The acceptance level is also going to be varied between when you're working with adults and kids.
Julia brings up a really good comment. Make sure that people aren't sick before interacting with one another or going into a public space. Yeah, I mean, but the timing, if you want to take everyone's temperature, like how would you do that? So you may have to adjust the amount of staff you have present at different times if you want to get everyone's temperature taken in a very timely manner. More scheduled cleaning and pre-time prep. Yeah. And when I think of youth programs, kids programs where you've got toddlers that are still mouthing toys and just social distance in general, when you've got families with small children that don't understand social distancing, like on playgrounds or other locations, how do you even do that?
Yeah, I think that's where the, like with the toys, that's where the accommodations are going to probably come in, where kids are going to have that toy be theirs.
All right, Julia brings up another good point, creating a culture where if people aren't feeling well, stay home. whether it's employee practices or just the culture of whether it's through peer pressure or otherwise, you know, don't come into our setting if you're ill. Okay, is that good enough? Anything else you want to add to that, Neely or Lucas? We good? All right. One more person just said, you just need to set new boundaries. It's not going to be great, but that's the reality where we live in. Yeah, and with those boundaries, clearly and consistently communicate them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're looking for accommodations, you want to look a lot of different places and varied places. So I mentioned that I've used the Braille Institute or the Down Syndrome Association I've used in my career, or other outside agencies that they might have had equipment or they might have had training specialized. In the military, they often use a medical person if somebody needs to be trained on giving an insulin shot, or they need to be trained on how to work with an individual who might have seizures. So it just kind of depends on the situation, but always looking to ask your coworkers or colleagues or other departments. KIT is a great resource. Parents, family members, or caregivers of the individual who needs the support, they're usually an expert on how to support that individual. Trial and error and being creative. I love coming up with accommodations. I love people trying to stump me on, you know, how to do this or don't do this, because I think it's great to try something. I have failed many, many times, and I just go back and try again, and that just makes it more exciting when I actually succeed. I have a few things that we have used here at KIT. KIT is very pro fidget. I just actually got this on Amazon. It's called, wait for it.
Is that the Thinking Putty?
Yes. Pretty cool stuff. I don't know. I like it. Overpriced, but it's called Think Putty, and it's kind of fun. I got one for each of my kids, and so that they're at home doing homework. So that's a fidget. Why does someone need a fidget? Well, people who need fidgets will fidget with anything. They'll fidget with a stress ball. They'll fidget with a pen. They'll fidget with their hair. You have an excess amount of energy, or you need to focus. This puts the energy here so you can focus here. So fidgets are actually necessary for people who need them. People who don't need them don't use them. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The other thing, a stress ball, but this other thing that this ball could be used for is if I wanted to put a hole in it, and I didn't have really good fine motor, I could put a hole in it and I could use it to hold this pen to draw with. If you've ever worked with seniors, you've seen tennis balls that go on the bottom of the walkers, and those are used so that they don't scrape along the floors. Tennis balls could also be used for a number of other things like that roller, or they could be used for also to hold on or grip a piece of equipment, because it's much easier to go like this than it is to go like that, at least for a lot of people who don't have those fine motor skills. This is just a normal sponge. You might have seen kids who paint with a sponge, but it's also really good. The bottom of it, if you needed to take off the bottom of this sponge and use it so that paper wouldn't slide, or a carpet square wouldn't slide, or something like that. So it can be used for safety. This side could be used for a number of things. Sometimes you'll go and let's say you have a front desk getting registration, and if sometimes sometimes they have like the flowers on the end of the pens. Well, it's just easier for someone visually to see and someone to pick up. That could also be done with lots of other little household items.
Mm-hmm. And Tobin, Lucas had said you can also put them at the bottom of chair legs, the tennis balls.
Yes. And has anyone ever used, I forgot to bring out my TheraBand, but I can get it during the break. TheraBands. So TheraBands are great. If you were, I know if I could see everybody, I would say, raise your hand if you were the kid who used to tilt your chair back. This is Rec and Leisure. I know you guys are out there. You used to go back and they used to say, on 4 legs, not 2. Well, if you put a TheraBand at the bottom, yes, see, there we go. You put a TheraBand at the bottom 2 legs of a chair, the kid, you can bounce your legs on that so that they can get their excess energy instead of tilting the chair back. Also, we use, this is a beach ball that is half inflated. So a kid or an adult or whomever needs to move while they're sitting. This half inflated ball also provides like a wiggle seat. You could go on a therapeutic site and pay lots of money for a wiggle seat, or you could get a 99-cent beach ball and just inflate it halfway. Or if you're at a rec center and you're playing ball and someone has a hard time catching the ball, much easier to catch a slightly deflated ball than it is an inflated ball. Anything else?
I have to show you my new favorite fidget when I was in Seattle at the airport. This is by Fat Brain Toy Company, and it's just these 2 little rubber discs that you can pop up and down. So it's a pretty quiet fidget, and it has a little carabiner so you could hook it to a belt loop. And almost all of my Zoom meetings that I have throughout the day, if you were able to see my hands, you would see me moving this back and forth. It's my absolute favorite thing. So in the chat box, do you have any accommodations that you either use personally that you find help you, or that you've used in your programs that you just know are go-to ones? And Greg had to leave, but he said, yes, the New England Patriots proved it's easier to catch a deflated ball. Oh, that Greg.
Oh,
Greg.
Okay, not the point, Greg, but yeah.
You're going to enjoy Greg's recreation story to now. It's a very wandering path. Anyone else use fidgets? All right. People are getting quiet, so I will
go to our scenario.
Oh, someone says keys. I play with my hair sometimes. Angelica had a spinner, chew gum, 2 rings on your thumbs, the stitches of your sleeves, pens for sure. Used to play with a fidget spinner. A small rock from the beach and you rub it. Doodling, yep. I was always a doodler in school. Someone sadly has lost their fidget spinner. So if you have Julia's fidget spinner, please return it. A stress ball, hair, doodling, picking hangnails on my fingers, fidget cube or play with my hair all the time. Danielle, I hope you don't have a loud fidget cube. There's someone who had a very loud fidget cube around me, and it's very distracting for me. Rope. Maybe you tie knots.
Do we have any questions about specific accommodations, or should we go to our, oh, do we take a break before the scenario?
I think we do. Don't we, Lucas, usually take a break about now?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay. Great. When would you like us to come back for our group work?
Let's say we'll come back in 10 minutes. So 8:19.
Okay.
I'm going to type it in here.
And if you get back early, I'll go ahead and put the scenario up here if you want to read it over.
And it was also because when you get in your breakout groups, you won't see it. So Kat emailed it. And so you can, to me, and I emailed it to everybody. So you can look in your email if you want to look at it once you get into your groups, or you can take a picture of the screen.
All right. I'm going to go get something to drink. Be back in a couple minutes.
Interfere with everybody's participation. Then there is a single adult, and this is the one person that is approaching staff. The other two have not yet approached staff, but we still want to hear how you could accommodate for them. So this is a single adult, and they approach the staff, and this person communicates that their friend needs an ASL interpreter for the adult activity area. This is not something you knew in advance. So we're going to go into groups. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm going to split everybody up into breakout rooms. We'll do about 5 per group or 4 per group, depending based on the numbers. And Kat and Neely, you will end up in groups. Okay. And if you come back, I think you will just automatically, even though you're co-hosts. But if you come back to the main room, I can put you into different groups. I'm not sure if you have that ability yourselves, if you want to go visit, other groups. So that'll be up to you if you want to leave a group and go visit another one so you can see more groups. Or if you just want to not be in any groups, you can just leave the group and let them work on their own. That's up to you.
I'm happy to be in a group. I just wanted to add one more thing. As with a lot of scenarios, there is not always all the information. So you have privilege to include or adapt information to come up with specific accommodations. I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes people get anxious if there isn't enough information that they don't know. So just kind of fill in where you see fit.
And just take a picture of this with your phone or pull up the email that Lucas sent earlier because you won't, I don't think, have access to this when you go into your small groups.
Okay, so is everybody ready? Away we go.
Tobin, you sent this, right, to in the email? Is it the same thing?
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
sent it just before class.
Cool.
What do you got? Oh, your fave. So, do I owe you and Lucky a
Hi.
So we should all be back, I think.
All right, Kat, do we want to take one example at a time and see what people came up with for each individual?
Yeah, that sounds great. It might be better to keep it with this view so we can see each other's faces. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people can just kind of, do you want to go by group, or I just thought they could kind of put in the chat box what they came up for. We had some pretty stellar ideas in our group.
Yeah, so for the first scenario, we had an adult attending with their family who uses a wheelchair, approaches and is having difficulty managing his manual wheelchair in through the grass. So
you can unmute or you can chat box or whatever. David, I'm going to call you out because you had such a good idea.
You want me to go first?
Well, I guess I just voluntold you, didn't I?
Poor David's getting picked on today.
Well, you gave him extra credit too, so he doesn't have too much to complain about.
Well, I was saying that if since you don't know if they want help, they may just want to like struggle and be left alone. But if you could ask them, hey, you know, do you need any help? And then if they did want any help, I kind of had an idea of if we had any like spare rope or something like that that you could cut into short pieces and just tie maybe like 4 on each side on each wheel. You could tie like a little bit of rope, and that would get traction and not interfere with the actual wheel going around. Because we're trying to think of how we could lay something down, but it would probably become a trip hazard for other people there. So I don't know, because I've never actually done this, but it was just an idea.
You are one of Neely's peeps, to be sure. Thinking outside the box.
One thing that I was unsure about for the first question was, like David said, like how comfortable would you know, like you don't want to just go up to somebody who's in a wheelchair or somebody who's disabled in a wheelchair and just say, do you want this help? It might make them feel uncomfortable per se. So
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm good.
You can always ask someone, just like I could ask you if you were struggling or I thought you were struggling. Oh, is there something I can do to help you? Do you need some help? And you have every right to say, no, I'm good, or yes, please, that kind of thing. So you can always ask for sure.
Yeah, it's a real etiquette no to ever put your hands on someone else's wheelchair without, you know, they're asking for that support. So that's one thing, even while you're asking, not putting your hands, you know, on that wheelchair at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing we said is just maybe like try to maybe find an accessible location that would be more accommodated to them so they could get around easier, and maybe like say, hey, this might be a good option for you if you want to be able to move around easier and still have access to all the things, places they want to go to with their family. That might be an option as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to training staff and volunteers before events so that they know the lay of the land. They know where different things are. So if they know where those paths are, that they can direct them in the moment. Any other thoughts on that first? Yeah, Lucas?
Oh, this might not, no, this wasn't number 1. This was for number 2. Taylor put it in the chat.
I had one more thing to add for number 1. If you had some staff member maybe that was like helping set up and break down, but didn't really have anything to do during the event, maybe they can kind of assist that person and help them like move. And if they didn't have enough time, maybe say like, well, where would you like to be? And then we could check in with you in like, you know, another 20 minutes if you need to go somewhere else or something. Just keep an eye on them and have that person kind of dedicated to them.
Awesome.
Did any other groups do number 1? Any other groups do number 1 and want to share anything for that?
In our group, we discussed about having a designated area, maybe like kind of like how public transportation does as well. Or I've seen in other venues like in ballparks, they'll have designated spaces for people with wheelchairs, and they're not specifically in one specific spot. Like they can be scattered. So we thought about like having this scattered designated areas, like a couple in the front or like middle and back. And they're not necessarily forcing them to sit there. Like if they want to sit there, they can. And like we thought about like laying down like a pathway, like some plywood or something like that. So that way it's easy for them to get there.
Yeah, and definitely with outdoor events, weather can completely change the environment where, you know, it's nice, dry, flat grass, but there's an unexpected rainstorm and suddenly it's muddy and slippery. And then there's on the fly, different accommodations that you have to make because it's suddenly not user-friendly for wheelchairs. All right, should we move on to number 2?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the second one was a family with 2 children has one child walking around screaming and hitting his ears with his hands as they approach the stage with the performing bands.
Hello. Our group talked about just maybe to have the kid included, give some headphones. So like maybe put some music, some soothing music, so he could walk and feel included with his friends and his family, and walking at the same time as the marching band, so it doesn't feel excluded. That's it, yeah.
Okay. So the headphones would be to minimize the noise. Yeah. Good idea. Usually that is, I mean, if you're not aware, that is usually indicating that that child is hypersensitive to sound, and that sound is physically hurting their ears, and the hitting of the ears is to actually counteract that physical pain that they're having from the noise. So that's a good idea to try to minimize the loud sound. Anybody else?
I'm reading Taylor's idea in the chat box. It's pretty cool, and it reminded me of I can't remember if it was Travis Scott or Kanye West, but they had built a private tent for their child, and it was quiet and secluded, and they had a monitor still showing the performance, but it wasn't at such a loud and crazy environment. It was more secluded and private with both parent and the child. And I think that's pretty much kind of what Taylor's idea says about like having a backstage designated area, and it's more quiet, and there's also headphones and earplugs provided as well.
Yeah, let me read that whole comment from Taylor. We figured that the child was being overstimulated by the whole event, and the music just tipped that said that child over the edge. We talked about having a backstage area for kids because it is much quieter and will have less people. There are also headphones and earplugs available at a lot of music events. So if an area isn't available for the child, there is also that option. We also made sure it was clear to make both children involved, as we don't want the other child to feel left out. Brilliant. For
Absolutely.
example, inviting both kids backstage or giving them both headphones. Very nice.
Very good. Yeah, that's a definite issue, that all the attention shouldn't go to the child with the disability and to accommodate that child, but we want to try to make something that's inclusive for everyone, but also be able to accommodate what that child's needs are. Excellent.
You also want to make sure that, you know, that the whole family could possibly stay together. When we first started doing front of the line passes, we said the child and one person could go with them on the ride. But then we realized, and this is how most amusement parks do it, that they really let the whole family go, because otherwise you might have a parent who's got 3 kids, and that parent can't go with the one kid and leave 2 other kids alone. So it just wasn't realistic. So, you know, unless you've got staff to watch those kids and it's really set up as a kids area, you would, you know, want to have it available for the whole family.
Yeah, and that's something I'm having challenges with in working with the large FIRST robotics competitions is, you know, debate over what's a reasonable accommodation for seating, because, you know, some folks are saying just the child with the disability, and then the team is saying we want our whole team to sit together. So we need the whole team to have enough space in the seating that provides accommodations. So we're still trying to figure that out. All right, any other thoughts?
Which other groups did number 2? We want to hear your ideas.
Our group did number 2 as well, and we kind of just talked about how to approach the parents. make it seem like you're really, like you're trying to help them. Like, can we do anything to help? And then maybe suggesting, since it's on the fly, we can't already have a designated area, just like finding a place that is quieter, further away. And then if we didn't have headphones, maybe suggesting like you could use a beanie or a hoodie or wrapping something around their ears to make it less noisy.
I think just offering that space and suggesting a place, because you know the venue better than the family does, where because it's probably some kids wanted to see the show and the one kid, it was too much. And so if you can just help find a place where the kids who want to see it can still see it, but the other kid is not so close or right in the crowd or something, that might really help.
All right, should we move on to number 3? All right, a single adult approaches a staff person and communicates their friend needs an American Sign Language interpreter for the adult activity area.
Did any groups do this one? We want to hear what you came up with.
General Nye. Hi. Our group, we kind of did more with the first 2 ones, but you guys already said what what we thought about too, pretty much. But for this one, we had an idea of like already having like written directions. So like even if we didn't have us American sign language person for it, then we could at least give them the written directions and they could read it, or even like just having. Even looking it up with I think there was like an app or something like that as well that somebody else mentioned it. But like that's what we had so far.
That's a great idea.
The statement reads adult activity area. Do you mean like bar, or like what specifically, like adult activity? Like
I was trying to run the gamut. I didn't really come up with an adult bouncy house. Like I wasn't really. I just was kind of like, I don't know, activities. Maybe there's a rope course. Well, I don't know.
Maybe there's like a beer garden that it's
Maybe
adults
there's
only.
a beer garden. Well, I guess you don't really need ASL for that. But,
well, I don't
know. I just kind of was posing the idea that sometimes people might make a request that you are not able to fulfill. You will not, with an event like that, unless you know there is going to be someone who requires the services of an interpreter. Most situations I have been in, people would not just hire an ASL interpreter, because that costs quite a bit of money, especially for like several hours. You're going to need more than one, and their hourly fee is pretty hefty for like a recreation department.
Lucas, what have you done in that situation?
I've interpreted, but that's not the best answer. But for big events, we do just automatically get interpreters. For our big like 200, 300 and up events.
But in that situation, there are going to be people there who need it.
Well, we have a pretty good idea because we have people who tend to come to our big events, and even if they don't, that's kind of like a requirement that we do that in the city. But if they're for smaller events, I mean, we try to put it out there how people would request it so that they will if they need it. But it that kind of thing definitely could come up. And yeah, you just have to, I mean, the idea of, having stuff written out at least is, because if you think about it, well, maybe it's a ropes course and you have to do the safety talk. Well, just having that stuff written out might be good for a lot of people. Or having it, you could have it in Braille and you only have to do that once, and just make sure you have it on site there as part of your equipment. And then you're not totally stuck without that person getting the, the safety information that you have to give them in that kind of a situation. So, doing those little things can help you be prepared. And then of course, you can, it's slow, but you can text on somebody's phone, and you can, there are things you can do spontaneously. We also have a access to the language line, and they have video remote interpreting. So in that kind of a situation, we could, that's if you think hiring a live in-person ASL interpreter is expensive, that's way more expensive, but you could use it in a pinch like that, to call up an interpreter, and have an interpreter there. So there are options, but they're none of them are ideal. The best situation is the person lets you know ahead of time, so you can hire an interpreter.
What about the talk to text?
I don't know if anybody, I don't have experience. I don't have experience using those kinds of things. But we're trying that kind of thing, but maybe other people do. I mean, those things get better and better, they're not ideal, but they definitely are better than they were before.
I guess
well-
the thing would be, it'd still just be a one-way conversation if you're doing it. We kind of were thinking that we're not prepared for this, so there's no way we can accommodate them at the time. But then just walking them through the steps and really educating them on how they could do it in the future, and that we'd be more than happy to accommodate them in the future. And this is how they would do that to kind of diffuse the situation.
You could also with that give them a free admission to come back to the next event or something like that, so that you're encouraging them to try again, and that you understand you weren't able to meet their needs, but that you really do want to try and make it work the next time.
Great. Well, I think you folks had some wonderful answers. Yeah, great job.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up our portion for tonight. Neely, do you have anything you want to say as we wrap up the respectful accommodations?
No, if
topic?
anyone has any questions, do you want to put our emails in the chat, or?
Yeah, I have.
They need any resources, you guys are welcome to reach out.
Look at how
Does anyone have any
organized I
questions
was,
right
Neely.
now? You are good.
Neely, I would love it if you could send us the list of different accommodation.
Oh yeah,
things
I'll send
you've
that to
come
you.
up with.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that would be great.
I will
It's
do
great
that.
just to see, it really is mostly just about coming up with creative ideas and trying things, like you said. We had a CTRS who worked with us, who figured out taping somebody's board that they were doing the art project on to a pumpkin, because that's where they were, and taping it to the pumpkin put it in a position that the guy could do it. And then using the eraser, he couldn't pick up the little pieces of paper for his collage, and so she put just a little glue on the end of the eraser of the pencil, and he could use the pencil to pick it up and stick it onto the paper that he was making his collage. And this participant had been there for years, and everybody always did the stuff for him, and he wasn't ever doing the stuff. And when she started working with us, she was like, that's crazy. Everybody can do things, you just have to figure out how. And
Absolutely.
and so,
even if it's a
it made
choice.
such a difference.
When I did all those arts and crafts classes at that camp, when a child or young adult came in and they didn't have a lot of mobility, the counselor would just start doing the activity, and I would say, well, what color do they want to use? What did you ask them? Where do they want that color? The top of the page, bottom of the page? What, you know, you could, there's always questions. If someone can answer you, and if you can determine yes or no, they always can have some control over what they're doing. If they can answer yes or no, then you can, they can have choice, for sure. Erasers are also really good for turning pages. Any other questions? Or any questions?
All right, well,
quiet.
I really want to thank you, Neely. It's great to hear about your experience and all the different things you've done. And it's a great example just for, you know, seeing everybody getting to see how people really come up with these things. And it's not any different than what people do in recreation all the time. It's not some magic formula or something that you have to, you know, have a special doctorate in or something. It's about being creative and figuring it out and trying things and being respectful, you know, like you said, asking people first, you know, do you want help? Can I touch your chair? You know, do you want me to help you with this? Can we try this? I don't know if it'll work, but and those things just make such a difference. So, but thank you so much.
Neely, lots of students are putting thank you in the group chat. So
thank you. I enjoyed it. I had a really good time. So I enjoyed talking to some of my fellow people. So good luck on all your upcoming adventures, whatever those might be.
At-home adventures.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you all next week. And of course, if you're having issues with the online platform, you can email me and email Kat and Laura, and we'll help problem solve. It seems like most of you are on, and most of you are completing it, and it's really about getting it all done by the end of the semester. It's not, you know, if you're having trouble figuring out exactly what needs to be done when, or you didn't finish something for this week, you know, don't worry, you can do it during the upcoming week before Greg's presentation next week. And so we're working it out together. All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
See you soon.
Professor?
Thank you.
Yes.
So we only have the kit due, right?
Yes. This week, so I'm really trying to limit anything else I give you because you have a lot to do for this.
Right.
And there were one or two things that I still had on the list of items that I wanted to cover for the class that I might try and figure out creative ways to fit them in. But for sure, especially as we're figuring out the whole kit thing, I don't want to give you other stuff for this class to work on.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I'll definitely let you know and give you plenty of time to do it.
Okay.
If there is anything else. All right.
Thanks so
Good
much.
night.
Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah, you too. Timmy, are you still there? Are you still there, Timmy?